Gosh, what a start to another fun adventure with two of my favorite co-hosts, Bob Ritz and Mindy May. Today we're going to be talking about how the emotional intelligence factor can be a superpower in and during your interview. I am so excited again to have both of you here, and thank you for taking the time out to join us and share your expertise and experience.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
You bet. So today, again, turning your emotional awareness into an interview superpower. The definition of emotional intelligence, EI, is the ability to recognize, understand, manage, and influence emotion in oneself and others. The concept of EQ, which is emotional quotient, is the measure of emotional intelligence, similar to how IQ measures cognitive intelligence. Please welcome Mr. Bob Britz, who is the founder of Career Coach Services and creator of the Career Coach System, a proven process of over 18 years, helping over 10,000 people find meaningful, fulfilling, and financially rewarding employment with over 30 locations. Bob and his team are ready to help you. And joined by the ever lovely Mindy May, MBA, certified career coach, is a longtime HR professional with over 20 plus years of experience. She has been the head of our HR departments throughout her varied career and has many years of HR expertise to help job seekers land dream jobs within 5 to 9 weeks without anxiety, stress, and fear. Hello.
Hello. Thank you, Kevin.
So, obviously, both of you have a tremendous of experience in supporting folks that are looking for their dream job or even better employment opportunities. And this is a very, very interesting variable in that quest, in that process. So, let's take it from the top and let's get going on this important conversation to hopefully help our listeners and viewers glean some gems that we're going to be talking about today. So let's take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Kevin. This is a really important topic, and people are very curious. So they start hearing about the EQ, right? Everybody knows about the IQ, the intelligence quotient. We all get IQ tests when we're growing up. We are told that our IQ doesn't change as we move on, although I think that is somewhat debatable. And now there's this concept of EQ, which has been around for a long time, but really came to light in the mid 90s. And a lot of its applications apply to the workplace and for a lot of good reasons. So let's talk about what that is and how it's measured. There are a lot of assessment tests from a lot of different companies that can be done to give you your EQ score. You will actually get a score if you take one of these tests. Some people score high, some people score very low, and some people score in the middle. But the idea with EQ, especially in the workplace, is to have a high score and to learn, if you don't have a high score, how to get yourself to that high score, because the EQ can actually change with a little bit of application and a little bit of learning. So let's talk about what it measures. There are 5 components of it. First is self-awareness. So what does that mean? Your ability to recognize your own emotions and their impact. Okay, that is the foundation of emotional intelligence, knowing yourself. Some people do, some people don't. It just depends on what your background is and what your orientation has been in this world. But it is a key component of your emotional intelligence. And then the second is self-regulation. So once you know yourself, can you control and redirect destructive emotions and impulses as they come your way? Are you flexible? Are you resilient? So can you self-regulate? It is my theory that a lot of people cannot, and as a society, we're kind of getting worse at this. I don't know what to blame, maybe reality television or something, but definitely self-regulation is a very, very important part of emotional intelligence. The next is motivation. Okay, that's important, being driven to achieve goals beyond external rewards. to focus on your intrinsic motivation and your persistence. Okay. Very important figuring out that motivation. The fourth is empathy, understanding and considering the feelings of others, key to building relationships to help with conflict resolution and effective communication. Okay. Not everybody has empathy. And it's an important thing to have and an important thing to learn. If you find out that you don't really have a lot of empathy, that can be changed. And the fifth thing is your social skills. So, how do you manage your relationships to move people in desired directions? How do you communicate? What are your conflict management skills and your teamwork? All of this is involved in your emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
and the way you either use or don't use those things can really affect you in actual life, but in the workplace as well.
Mhm.
Well, those are so interesting too, and obviously we're gonna be focusing on how we can turn on that emotional awareness, emotional intelligence specifically in an interview
Mhm.
where there's a lot going on. There's nonverbal, there's verbal, there's how to sit, where to sit. There's so many things that you really need to be cognizant of. And I would also add, I know you're going to talk about this, but this is a practice behavior where if you understand it, you can get better at it. And it's not an overnight deal. It's something that what we're going to be talking about can help you maybe ascertain where you can start learning more about how to be more effective, specifically in an interview.
Right. So
Right.
let me add a thought to this. There are three things in life that drive me crazy.
Okay.
Personal branding drives me a little crazy. Emotional intelligence drives me a little bit crazy, and jumbo shrimp. Those three things are my three things I don't like in life. Okay? It's an oxymoron
Okay.
to have jumbo shrimp.
Explain.
Explaining is that I think that emotional intelligence for lots of people falls in that bucket of I don't really know what this is. And if I do understand what this is, how do I then implement that in my life? How do I make the changes that we're talking about here, right? And Kev's absolutely correct in this. You get into an interview and everything else takes over. Your fear takes over. That's your first thing, right? Everyone's motivated by fear. So you get the interview and your fear takes over. And then your ability to articulate gets a little bit trashed and you start mumbling and going on and rambling and things. And you're trying at the same time to identify with and work with the interviewer, which I think is a lot of what we're talking about here, is to be able to interface with somebody else in a way that creates a positive outcome for both of you.
And
So how do you implement this, Mindy? How do you make this happen in someone's life?
How do you make them have a higher level of emotional intelligence? Is that what you're
We,
saying?
yeah, we get rid of jumbo shrimp and we
Okay.
focus on the emotional intelligence piece of this. How
Well,
does
as if
adapt and go?
only right, as if only we could make people do that, which we can't. People have to make themselves. But I do think that all of these things we're talking about with self-reflection, mindfulness, active listening, empathy building, ability to get feedback,
Mhm.
ability to participate in conflict resolution, all of those things are key components of your emotional intelligence, and they can be trained and they can be learned.
Mhm.
And hopefully if someone's open enough and maybe they've been through enough difficulties in life to start to realize that this is something that they're lacking and they need to hone up on it, then I do believe that your emotional quotient can change. It's really kind of up to the person and whether or not they want to improve it and if they see the value in that.
Mhm.
can I add 2 things to that? We talked, pre-show where, maybe somebody has, trauma or, a death or a divorce or something that they've had to go through and survive, and then that kinda segued into trauma, where you're more apt to be more sensitive, your spidey senses, and it's similar, right? But I would also add that emotional intelligence can only happen if you are surrounding yourself with intelligent people who can also share that behavior with you, because you cannot you cannot practice emotional intelligence on somebody that's closed off or doesn't understand it,
Right.
or is going through problems. I would say that if you're going to learn this or be trained by it, surround yourself with people that understand it as well. That can either help coach you, like you two, or guide you, mentor you with emotional intelligence, because it is it's a patient process.
Right,
Sure.
right. And it's not something, the concept is not something that everyone is open to. So you're right. You need open-minded people who see its value and
Mhm.
who are willing to dive in and even see if they can make a change in themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a great tool. So let's talk about it in terms of interviewing. Okay. What does it mean to a candidate? How can you use it? What are the good points? What are the difficult points about it? So let's start with the first concept, which is self-awareness. All
Mhm.
right. What is the candidate's perspective? During an interview, candidates with high EI can manage their emotions and remain calm under pressure. They're able to provide thoughtful responses rather than reacting impulsively to tough
Mhm.
questions. Okay, you know anybody that does that? I think you probably do. What is the interviewer's perspective? Interviewers look for candidates who demonstrate emotional control, especially under stress, to assess how they might handle challenges on the job. So
Mhm.
that's what the interview is looking for. They're essentially looking for people with high EQs.
We talk about self-awareness as the first one that we go into. Um, there's a couple ways to develop self-awareness. One of them, is you mentioned earlier, is with peers who are intelligent, who will give you feedback and let you see kind of what you're doing right and wrong and what you're approaching. The other piece of it is we have a series of assessments that we do. They're not tests. None of these are tests. They're all assessments. There's no right and wrong answers. That's why I'm bringing that up. But the self-awareness piece is really important because there are a lot of people who don't really realize how they interface with the world around them. They don't have that connection. A strong marker in this is the people who are the high driver people, right? The type A people. They can be aggressive. They tend to default to anger. They will say things in blunt terms. And that doesn't go over with people who are more softer perceptives of the world. And until they realize that, they can go tromping through an interview or tromping through an office or tromping through their life, completely oblivious to how they're affecting other people.
Hmm.
Right,
And
right.
those people are no fun to work with, and
Hey, hey,
it,
hey, hey, hey.
they're not.
You're talking to one. You're talking to one. Hey, here.
They're not, and I'm not going to work with them ever.
Right. I know. Right. Be aware. I mean, obviously, we can't ask everyone what their EQ is or demand that they have a certain score before we hire them. But
Yeah.
there are ways that we can talk about it and that we can sense it according to these various aspects of emotional awareness. So the other one is self-regulation. First, there's self-awareness, and there's self-regulation. So from a candidate's perspective during an interview, candidates with the high EQ can manage their emotions and remain calm under pressure. They're able to provide thoughtful responses rather than reactive impulsively to tough situations. Okay,
Mhm.
that's the candidate's perspective. The interviewer's perspective, they look for candidates who demonstrate emotional control, especially under stress, to assess how they might handle challenges on the job. So this may seem kind of obvious, but it is really, really important for somebody to be able to handle their stress. And if they can't, they're not going to do very well on the job interview, and they're most likely not going to get the job. So, learning how to handle that from the interviewer and the candidate's perspective is really important.
Mhm.
So, Mindy, a person with over 20 years of experience like yourself, as a top leader, HR executive expert, is this allowed to be tested if, say, you've got candidates, or can a company implement that? We're in California, so we're talking California specific, but is this a legal assessment to distribute to interviewees?
It
Yep.
is legal. It definitely is legal. However, you wouldn't want to base any hiring decisions primarily on the results because that could be discriminatory. I know
Mhm.
that's how it works in California. So if the test is part of a whole a variety of tests, or if it's just one factor in hiring, then it's fine. But if it's not, then yeah, you're
Yeah.
gonna.
So it's a consideration.
It's a consideration, right?
Right.
But a
And
company can kind of say, "Oh, we just want to see, your personality or emotional intelligence test." I know enough companies that may use that as a consideration to make a decision for them. Would that be fair?
I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
I think so.
in general, when we do these assessments, not tests, assessments, um, they have been proven nationally, actually globally. They have never had a bias lawsuit come up out of the assessments itself. Where companies come into trouble is they may cherry pick a few people to do the assessments with. That is not quote legal. I'm sure
Oh, I
many
see.
states have that
Right.
position.
Yeah.
But if you have people at the second or third tier in an interview process, and you have to assess all those people, you can't just assess the people you think you want. And in
It has
doing
to be a
so,
standard.
you can use the scores. You can use that as a determinant factor. However, I think most states say 25% to 33% of the decision can only be used for the assessment piece of it. The rest has to be the interviewing, the experience, and everything else.
Sure.
So these are widely used. They're
Right.
widely used. The company that we use has been doing it since 1985. Never had a lawsuit, never had an issue come up. So we know that they're solid.
So
So
if you've got an interviewee coming in and breaking pencils because he's frustrated,
yeah,
that might be a good one to issue an assessment.
You know,
or the person who's late to every
True.
interview.
yeah.
Yeah.
It happens. A long time ago, when I first graduated from business school, I interviewed in a major company called Hay. Have you ever heard of that? Hay and Associates. Anyway, a long time ago, I interviewed there, and they actually had a test that I had to take that was just designed to frustrate me.
Oh,
It was just there was no, it was like a puzzle that I had to do. There was no real solution to
Oh,
it.
jeez.
They were right. They were
That's
just
fun.
trying to see how frustrated I got.
I'd love to see what that test is like.
When I finally realized that, I
Hmm.
stopped trying so hard on the test
That's
because
Interesting.
awesome.
and I did. I think I acted sufficiently frustrated because I was.
Yeah.
And they weren't expecting you to not act frustrated, but they wanted to see how far that took you.
So maybe you had a
Interesting.
pile of broken pencils on the floor near
Right,
you.
exactly. They're just like sweating, and
Yeah.
they're like, that's what they're noticing. They don't care if you solve the puzzle or
Oh,
not. So
yeah.
it's been around for a long time, and it's an
Interesting.
interesting measurement
Huh.
of who we are and how we might perform on the job.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Interesting.
So what would the next step be for a person to identify emotional intelligence and to prepare for it for an interview?
Well, I think the third thing that it measures is empathy. Okay,
Mm.
empathy is really important. It really can dictate how a person functions, and what kind of employee they're going to be. So, from a candidate's perspective, a candidate who can read the room. I know, and I think that anybody who knows what that is probably can read the room,
Mhm.
pick up on social cues from the interviewer, such as body language and tone, adjust to their responses accordingly. According to what they've said, you adjust your response accordingly. So you've picked up on what's going on, you're aware of it, and you want your uh, reactions to be empathetic and fit in somewhat with what the interviewer is asking you. Okay. So that means someone's adaptable and easy to
Mhm.
work with. From an interviewer's perspective, the interviewer may ask questions about teamwork or client interactions to see if the candidate understands others' emotions and can act
Mhm.
empathetically in professional situations. So, a lot of people are not in touch with their empathetic side. And I think it is a really important aspect, especially for your candidacy, and should be paid attention to
Mhm.
Yeah.
in many
Yeah.
ways. Okay. And
Yeah.
and the fourth is your social skills. Okay. What are your social skills, and how can they be impacted by your emotional intelligence? So from a candidate's perspective, a candidate with strong emotional intelligence are very skilled at communicating and building relationships during interviews. May come across as more likable and personable, which leaves a positive impression, right? So what does that mean? You're good at interviewing, you're likable, you're personable. All of these things fit into a person's emotional intelligence and how they handle it with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And then, from the interviewer's perspective, interviewers often access how well candidates communicate and collaborate, gauging their ability to build relationships and work well within a team. They may ask questions about previous teamwork experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things the interviewer is looking at too. So it's just so much easier to know how to handle an interview if you've got these social skills. And if you don't, there's a lot of ways you can work on that. You can get an interview coach, which Bob and I are both do a lot with our clients.
Mm-hmm.
You can take a seminar, you can do some reading, a lot of information out there about how to relate well during an interview.
I would like to add to the social quotient where if if I've got a social person, not too social, I don't want to hear about your personal stuff or what you did this last weekend, but a high social personality would be possibly a perfect leadership uh, type of person, or they're going to add to the company culture and that to keep the morale, to keep the positivity, but also team building, what you just said, where
Right.
if I've got a social person, the chances of that social person being infectious and bringing the positivity or the energy and the enthusiasm to a company, I would say they're trainable in any other item or any other area, but I would rather have a social person that can regulate their social skills to not
Mm-hmm.
be too social. But I really feel that a social person is such a benefit and asset to any company that would be something that would be really refreshing to see
Mm-hmm.
during an interview.
Yes, I
And
agree. That's a really good point because basically, you can teach people anything, but can you really teach them on the job how to communicate effectively, how to build teams, how to be a leader? These are the skills that they need to learn that can come to the job with the basics of them
mm-hmm.
and enhance from there. Especially in a medium-sized company where no matter what job you have, you're not hiding behind your computer all day. You're most likely interacting with others and needing to be effective when you do that. And so your emotional intelligence seriously comes into play.
Yeah.
And I would say if you don't have that social, it's not as natural to you. Maybe you are more uh, inhibited or shy, or maybe just a personality that doesn't do that on a full-time basis. Don't come into an interview pretending you're social because your social battery will be exhausted at the
Mm-hmm.
end of each day. If you come in through that interview pretending to be social or being somebody that you're not and you actually get hired, you're going to be likely tasked with maybe roles or responsibilities
Mm-hmm.
that are so outside of your ability to and effectively produce that you're not doing anybody any favors.
Right. And we're kind of blending three things here. We're blending behaviors, we're blending motivations, and we're blending EQ and the things we're talking about right now. The places is probably most dramatically displayed is when someone's going to be hiring a president or a CEO, because that person needs to be very comfortable interviewing with any one person who shows up, interviewing with the board of directors ad nauseum, right? They go through multiple interviews. They have to be able to articulate clearly their past experience and their past successes. And if they're not able to do that publicly or into a group that's interviewing them, they're not going to be seen as a leader, because the CEO or president of a company, she has to be the face of the salespeople. She has to be the number one salesperson for the company, relaying the concepts and the precepts and the values of that company to the shareholders, the public, whoever is looking at them. And if you can't make those interviews because you're too introverted, or you can't articulate your plan because you're not smart enough, then you've got a big problem.
Right.
And so these interviews, as people go through interviews, and the reading the crowd is incredibly important, because if I'm talking to an interviewer and I'm rambling, I need to be able to see in their disposition that they want me to detach and move on.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that are too social get in there and they just start doing this, right? And they don't have the filter to stop. And that's one of the biggest coaching elements that I have with my clients is answer the question, all 2-3 parts, but don't give me 80% one, 10% two, and 10% three. You got to answer all the parts together. And they have a very hard time with that because they're uber focused on, the detail of things.
Right.
And that's
So,
what's so neat about you too, is that you can help people go through this. And Mindy,
mhm.
correct me if I'm wrong, don't you have a new certification to assess emotional intelligence?
I
Yeah.
do. Well, yes, can give the emotional quotient test by TTI, which will actually give you a score of your emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
And a lot of people are finding this just super helpful in analyzing themselves, in being able to analyze others. And also, when you see the results of the test and you read out what you're like and how you do relate to other people, it
Mhm.
offers ways to improve this and ways to change it. So it's a movable score, and it's good to think of it that way, because most people who are taking the test and who want to know this are looking to improve. They're looking
Mhm.
to improve what they think might be a gap in their emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Maybe they've faltered in an interview. Maybe they're not getting their point across with their team. Maybe they're feeling out of place in their own company. What's going on? The emotional quotient test can really help you with that.
And
It's really
help
more of a
you,
dimension. It's more
right,
of
to be able to work with these people to get
Right.
them into the dream job that they want to get into, and among the other attributes that you're able to help them
right.
through this process.
And then
Exactly.
I agree with Mindy. This assessment is a individual product primarily. You don't find it used as much in corporate America to score people because it's extremely subjective. I mean, your emotional intelligence is very subjective, and they're more looking at your behavior, what motivates you, what drives you, your skills, your tasks. But for the individual to know how they impact other people, that's a big wake up call for a lot of people. I didn't realize that I was interacting this way. I didn't realize I was affecting people this way. So it's super helpful. And these
Right.
assessments are validity tested. So they're as accurate as they can possibly be. And these assessments are available. Mindy has them, I have them, the whole company has them available for our clients to use as a benchmarker for you as before you go into interviews. Super helpful.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Agreed. If
All
you
right.
don't know what your own motivations are, if you're curious, the test will really help you with that too.
Oh,
You may find out that you're motivated by something differently than what the company's expecting, or you're motivated by something different than what the interviewer is expecting.
yeah.
So that's an important thing to know and identify inside of yourself, so that you can align your motivations with what you're trying to achieve.
Well, it's just a huge testimonial to what you have been accomplishing out there in the world. And uh, boy, I gotta say, I wish I had you guys helping me throughout my career, Bob, to know what you were doing all these years. I think that it would have definitely uh, benefited me greatly. And so I absolutely, if you're looking for a job or on the fence, to reach out to either Bob or Mindy, just reach out, see what they have to say, because they will save you a ton of time, a ton of money, and you may not have to make those awful decisions of
Right.
relocating or moving or putting the house up for sale. These two can absolutely change your life.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the only shout out I'm going to give to you
Ah,
today.
well, thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Yes, I hope that's true. That's what we're here for. We're
Yeah.
here now.
Well, the
Okay,
thing
so
is
what's
that
next?
just real quick, the assessments we're talking about, this assessment has 3 components to it. One is your behavior, your DISC profile. Who are you on the inside, which doesn't change. Looks at your behaviors, which absolutely do change. And for example, if you're not motivated by utility or money and you want to be a salesperson, probably not going to work out very well for you because you need to have that motivator to go do that, right? And then the third piece is the emotional quotient in the assessment. And that gives you the wraparound. It kind of ties all 3 things together. Super valuable to be able to see yourself through that lens. And it's the lens that you should be looking at yourself as you interact with other people. And it's hard to do on your own.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Mindy, what's next? What's next on the recipe?
Well, I think we should talk about motivation a little bit more, because
Okay.
when you're in there on your interview, that is a main thing they're going to want to find out. Okay. So they're going to test you in certain ways by asking certain questions that sort of bring out these answers that can identify just how emotionally intelligent you are. And one of them is, can you describe a time when you had to manage a conflict at work?
Mm.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a really good question. It gets asked a lot. And what they want to see is how creative your answer is, how engaged you were, how willing to admit your part in the conflict you were, and then how you resolved it. So when they're going to ask you a question like that, you are going to go in there with an answer already rehearsed and memorized, and one that comes from your narrative about yourself, from your resume, etc., that can really showcase you in a positive light. And in order to do all of those things, you've got to be emotionally intelligent. You got to pick up on what's going on, why they're answering the question, and in that context, what would be the best answer.
Do
So,
you do you have an example of that? I know that you did something similar to this, and what would be an appropriate general response or idea that somebody could start, practicing?
Mhm.
you mean of a conflict at work?
Yes.
An
Mhm.
example of a conflict
Yes.
at work? Yeah. Okay. So, say I'll use an example of my own where when I worked for the Cirque du Soleil, people always like to hear those stories. And there were a great deal of artists from all over the world. So I'm dealing with different cultures, very, very different cultures, different ways of handling things. People think different things are rude than other people do, and I'm mixing them all together in a cohesive group. And we have to put on a show every night, which is, if you don't do it right and if you don't communicate correctly, it can actually be a matter of life or death,
Mhm.
because they're doing these incredibly difficult things. So people who were willing to come and meet and open up and see the differences in communication, understand the conflicts and the risks, and assess them adequately, did a lot better in that communications than people who didn't. And so we would gather groups together just to talk, just to explain themselves, what they meant by
Mhm.
what they said in their culture. And then I would serve as the guide to create a cohesive definition of putting it all together. Okay.
Wow.
Because those kinds of interactions at work can also happen when you're not in a different culture. You're just a
Right.
different kind of person. You just think differently. And
Mhm.
given a chance to explain yourself can really help. And the only way you can really do that is by understanding yourself, being self-aware, which is the
Mhm.
the top component in emotional intelligence. So,
Yeah.
yeah, things
That's
like that.
awesome.
Mhm,
So when you're thinking about that, answering that question, if you're in the interview,
mhm.
what I'll say, actually, Mindy, you said this earlier, Mindy, in your definition, which is, what was the problem? How did you fix it? And how is it going to make it easier going forward? That's what they really want to hear. And you can't give 7 answers. You need to give 3. 3 is the number everyone in the U.S.
Right.
identifies with. Goldilocks and the 3 bears, right? Everyone thinks in threes. So what was the problem? How did I address it? And how did I fix it so it's not going to happen again, either internally or externally? And that's what they're looking for in the answer.
Yeah, very good. Another good question is, how do you handle criticism or feedback? Okay. Got to think about how you answer that question, because criticism is a triggering word, for lack of a
Mhm.
better definition. Okay. So, right. How do you handle criticism or feedback? Do you take it in? Do you pause for a moment and listen and then
Mhm.
try to adjust what's going on accordingly? Do you get defensive? Do you blame it on other people? You got to think about your intrinsic motivations
Mhm.
and how you respond to those two things. And I think clearly the interviewer wants to know if you're going to fold under the slightest criticism, or you're going to accept that as feedback to improve what you can do. So that's a great question, and I think people need to really examine how they're going to answer it in terms of themselves and what they're
Mhm.
aware of they can do.
Well,
Yeah.
there's one advice I would say is think before you answer that question.
Yes.
And I would, challenge anybody if you would like to interview me, I'd love to be a sample interviewee and go through these questions because I feel that it would be really difficult. I think at this point in my career, I know what to say to get the result, but I feel that it would be really tough to be honest in
Right,
most cases of
right,
a
Yeah.
question like that because I would feel like immediately I would say, well, it depends on who's criticizing me. And
right.
that is the truth, but that's not what they want to hear.
No, yeah,
And so that would be, almost in a way, I'd have to practice the narrative of that, which wouldn't
yes,
necessarily be the truth of how I would probably naturally react. Maybe
Mhm.
onesie twosies, it might not be a problem. But if I'm working with a micromanager type who's constantly critiquing me, that I will tell you that would be probably, get on me enough where that would probably be the end of that employment arrangement. And what a waste of time for everybody. So,
right.
I feel that you really, need to ask yourself at what point are you willing to be honest, or do you need the job so bad you're willing to just fake it for a while?
Mhm.
Yes, I like what you're saying because an answer to that question can also include what kind of boundaries you would put around
Mhm.
the amount of non-constructive criticism or feedback that
Mhm.
you can take. I mean, I think there's a difference between feedback that's truly feedback
Yeah.
or feedback that is sort of designed to just control or manipulate or has a more negative spin. So I'm envisioning an answer to that question, which includes how you would put boundaries around it, which I would
Mhm.
love if I were interviewing someone and they said that. I
Yeah.
would,
Or it could be a giant red flag of said managers asking you this question because they are not an effective manager and maybe they are a micromanager. And so they're poking you a little bit. They're pushing the envelope a little bit to
Yeah.
see how you're going to react to that. Because if you're going
yes.
to say, "Oh, I don't mind criticism if it's a learning experience," and for me, it's like, what on earth could you possibly teach me that I'm, qualified for the job? I've got the expertise for the job
Mhm.
unless that person who I'm working with has 10, 15, 20 years of expertise that maybe I don't have, that would be the one person I wouldn't mind getting the critique from. But if it's a hiring manager who is a control freak, that would be definitely a different scenario to
Mhm.
be respected.
Yeah.
Right.
When you take it from the inside, we're talking about the outside, the interviewer approaching you. On the inside of the person, there's basically four responses that come up for challenges or critiques. One person will always fight back and argue and want to have a debate about it. That's the one person. The second person has a very high need to have personal contacts and personal friends. So when they get hit with a conflict situation, they're failing as a friend. They're failing, and they'll tend to start to blather answers out. The third person won't do anything. They'll just take it in, absorb it, absorb it, absorb it until they've had enough. And like Kev would say, I'm out of here. I'm done. Right. And then the fourth person is the one who has all the facts and details. They're very knowledge driven. If you challenge them, you're challenging their knowledge and all the research
Yeah.
they went into whatever they're thinking about. So they're naturally going to push back. So a person needs to understand who they are in that spectrum,
Yeah.
how they're going to react on an innate level that ties into their emotional quotient because that affects your answers.
Yes.
If you go in defensive, you're not going to have a good interview.
I love
Or
it. Yeah.
I mean, I know it for this time of my life where I would probably make a funny out of it. Maybe I don't know exactly what I would like. Obviously, I'm business development marketing, so I think I'd go in a little bit more creatively. But honestly, I don't know how I would react to that. Like other than tell a dumb dad joke or something. I mean,
Right. 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 Well, it's interesting because how you react to that is really everything. And it's what
Mhm.
they want to know in the interview.
right,
And I think that, you do want to be honest because you got to remember you're also interviewing them.
right,
If they are
true,
asking you that question because the manager you're going to be reporting to is super critical, good thing to know. They
Yeah.
know it. If they know it, they're asking you that question. I've actually had some clients tell me that the recruiter has told them that the boss is a micromanager and really difficult to work
right.
with.
Yeah.
And I
Nope.
thought, But I thought, that's so fair. That's so fair because good to know. Big decision whether or not to take a job. For
Hmm.
me, that answer would be no, but maybe some other people can handle it better, you
Yep.
know?
Hmm.
So,
And that's a key point too, Minnie, where you're interviewing them. So if you and in my experiences, my gut has told me whether or
Hmm.
not this is going to be a good fit or not in
Yeah.
the interview,
right.
right? So take that into consideration. And again, working with you too, you can help with this interview process and the
Right.
narrative and what to say and even things like this, even these questions, you all can help candidates. So don't be afraid. Reach out to these
Yeah.
guys.
Okay.
There's two silver bullets. I'll give you one silver bullet now, and the second one towards the end of our podcast. When you're asked a question that you don't know the answer to right away, there's a very simple way to get back control of the interview. And you say, "Hey, Kevin, that's a really good question. Can you tell me more about what you're looking for in the answer? That's a really good question. Can you explain X more?" And it gives you about 3 or 4 seconds in your brain to regroup and think of what you want to say. And you're getting more information from the interviewer, so you may be clarifying that as you go through the process. It saves you from that stall. It saves you from having to just go, let me think about that. You don't
Right.
want to do that in an interview. You want to be able to keep the conversation going. So that's silver bullet number one. Very effective.
Love it. Love it.
And
And
say eye contact too, right?
definitely.
Eye
Hmm.
con don't start looking up left. Isn't that like where you're
Right.
telling a lie?
That's right.
That's debatable, but it is true that you want to look at them so that I don't think you're avoiding things or hiding things. You may
Right.
not be, you may just be a little bit nervous for a second and thinking inside your head, but you want to try to look at them. And I wanted to bring up another question too that might happen during an interview that to test your emotional intelligence, which is a little more positive than the last one, which is how do you build trust and maintain relationships with
Oh.
colleagues?
Hmm.
Okay, that is a great question because it really gives you a chance to say some positive things about who you are, how you relate to other people, what you've done in the past, how trusted you are. But it also is a question that indicates that's what they're looking for in their company. They're looking for
Hmm.
somebody who's trustworthy, who can get along with other people well, who can maintain relationships. Those are three really positive things that you're looking for in a culture and a cultural fit. So
Hmm.
that question is a great opportunity to shine, to strut your stuff about how great you are and could be in their culture. And it also gives you a little insight into what their culture is.
I love that one. And don't be a
Definitely.
bragger. Don't go in there ultra confident, super confident, or that because that can be a turnoff too. And read the room when you're answering these questions. You know, keep it nice and simple, intro, body, conclusion, or however you usually teach your candidates. And I love that positive question, and that may very well be the three questions that you get. So I love it.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
So we're going to be wrapping up here soon, and I wanted to really finish this and make sure that we covered all points. But I know that we could probably talk about this for the next day.
Right.
Hmm.
Right.
Possibly, we can follow up with a section two of this, and maybe even more of those type of questions and how an emotionally intelligent person would answer them. So, with that being said, would you like to wrap up and give us a couple more end thoughts in mind?
Sure. I think emotional intelligence in an interview can be really helpful for to the candidate and the interviewer.
Hmm.
It can create a positive, productive environment where people aren't wasting their time. It's a great way to showcase your abilities. To how you function in social environments, right? Because beginning right there at the interview, you're in a social environment and make you a more appealing hire.
Mhm.
So you want to be relatable, you want to be communicative, even if you're doing a job that won't necessarily require those things on a daily basis. It's really important to pull that out in the interview because they most first and foremost, and I know this as the HR professional that I am, they want to hire somebody that they would like to work with.
Hmm.
Okay. And you have an opportunity in that interview that you've made it all the way to showcase to them that it's you.
Mhm.
Love that.
Mhm.
I love that. Bob, final thoughts?
Yeah, yeah. There's so much more that goes into interviewing than people realize. And this emotional quotient piece it's a huge underlying part that people don't spend enough time looking at. And when we talk about interview prep with our clients, it's everything from, do you stand up in the lobby or sit down while you're waiting? What do you do with a cup of coffee when you're in someone's office? Where do you sit in a boardroom table not to upset the people that are in power? All kinds of stuff are these nuances that you have to be able to read the room, know what's going on, respond accordingly. It's incredibly important to do
Mhm.
that. And we teach that to all of our clients that do interviewing with us.
Yeah.
Right.
And the assessments that we do are highly validated. You can go out and take Myers-Briggs or Strength Finders or Enneagram or Harper's or any of these different types of reports. They don't give you what this report gives you, not even close.
Right.
And it's readable. But the truth of all those reports I just mentioned, it comes down to the person debriefing you on it, right? If the
Right.
debriefer's not good, you're not going to get out of it what you need to get out of it.
Yeah.
So that's really important to think about. But the last thing, that second silver bullet I wanted to give you, at the end of the interview, if it's an hour interview, it's at the 45-minute mark. If it's a half-hour interview, it's at the 20-minute mark. But you always get this question out of your mouth. And that question is there anything you've heard today that would preclude me from moving forward in the interview process?
I love
That
that one.
question gets a lot of feedback. And what we found is people misconstrue your answers a lot of times because they're busy, they're writing, you're in the 15th interview, they don't get everything right. And they get a chance to share with you what those errors are. Oh, no, that's not correct. Here's the correct
Right.
answer to that, right? So you're kind of chewing up all the EQ elements in that one question at the very end to hear what they need to tell you.
Mhm.
Super helpful.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
that's
You could
great.
almost
You're
go
right.
ahead.
That is a magic silver bullet
Yeah.
Yeah.
because really, if they get that out and you're able to answer it in an appropriate way that alleviates their potential objection,
Yep.
then you've
And you're
just
back in the game.
you.
You're back
Yeah,
in the game.
right.
So, are there for folks that want to get a hold of you and just chat with you to see what services that you can offer them? Do you have an alignment call offer that you could share
Mhm.
today that somebody could take advantage of?
Yes, we do. We have a free 30-minute alignment call, and you can schedule that with Bob or myself or one of our other coaches on our team. I'll put the link in the comments here, and that is where we find out where you're at in your career, what
Mhm.
your challenges have been, where you'd like to go, and we match it with our services. So we do all kinds of things from resume redos to LinkedIn profile upgrades to interview prep to networking solutions,
Mhm.
to finding your passion and purpose. And of course, we also do the assessment testing, not a real test, like Bob says, but these do, like the EQ test, the DISC assessment, the 12 driving forces, all of these are designed to help you identify your motivations, your passions, and find you even a job title that might be a really good one for you to work towards based on who you are.
No, excellent. 30 locations. You've helped over 10,000 happy campers get
Yeah.
fulfilling jobs and or careers. And the guarantee is within 5 to 9 weeks when everything has been assessed and they go through the entire program with you. 5 to 9 weeks is about a good average to look forward to landing your career job, career employment or opportunity. So
Yeah.
again, thank you both for joining me today. My name is Kevlin Paskos. I am a business strategist, marketing business development expert, helping founders create growth for their companies in the construction industry. So again, thank you for joining us today. You can find all three of us, Mindy May, Bob Britz, and Kevlin Paskos on LinkedIn. Go to our circle profile picture, and underneath you'll see contact information on how to get a hold of us. Please feel free to send us a personalized DM. And like Mindy said, she'll go ahead and put a link to reach out for a free alignment call, 30-minute free alignment call. And I'll be dropping DMs on how to watch this podcast in case that you missed our loveliness today in sharing about the emotional intelligence in an interview process. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Bob, Mindy, again, thank you. And we will see you soon. Have a great
Thank
weekend,
you.
everyone.
Thank you,
care.
Kevin, our superstar podcaster. Really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Woo woo. All right,